Hello, everybody. It's Mike. So today I want to talk to you about something really important having to do with a recent interaction. We've had online some discussions. My last video, BPD, victim blaming, partners of borderlines or MPDs, the truth about victim blaming. And I got some great responses and comments which I want to respond to. But in order to heal, if you have been in a destructive relationship with a borderline, in order to heal, it is extremely important that you keep yourself in the equation. If all you are doing is looking at the borderline from outside of the fence of your experience, you are bound to make inaccurate conclusions, which will not result in you feeling better, gaining healing. You have to see that you are part of the equation. You have to understand what and this is true with everybody, even me right now, anybody talking about any subject has an emotional agenda. There's nothing wrong with having an emotional agenda. The problem is when you're not aware of what your emotional agenda is and whether or not your emotional agenda is leading you to inaccurate or irrational conclusions based on your need in the moment. You cannot take your personal needs and your personal emotional agenda, your desire for the outcome, out of your perception of what's happening with the borderline, what's happening with you. But if you are able to take a look at yourself and know what you truly want, you will then be able to take a look at your perceptions of the borderline and your judgments, your conclusions about them. And this is what I'm glad that it's brought this up, because what I talked about in that video was I was going after the idea that borderlines know what they're doing, that they know what they're doing, that they're planning it out, that they're choosing to do it to you, and basically that they're evil. And what I talked about, and I talk about it a lot, but I talked about it again yesterday, which is that when a partner of a borderline has been hurt, damaged, especially after they've been discarded, it's usually after that the discard has happened or after they've had to leave, and then the real understandable anger and pain sets in. And it's very healing to be angry. So I understand in the beginning why it's helpful for somebody to point out the borderline is evil. They did this, they manipulated me, they lied to me, they betrayed me, they used me. There's going to be some truth in that. And that's helpful because they've been in denial in the relationship the whole time of those aspects. The bottom line, they've been in denial of the fact that there's no hope of ever having a real relationship with an untreated borderline. It's impossible. So now that the reality has hit them that the relationship isn't going to go the way that they wanted for whatever reason, then they go through a very healing process of blaming the borderline. And so I understand that. But in order to heal, you have to get past that. That's a superficial, anger and resentment is a defense mechanism, a necessary defense mechanism that creates distance. And then when you have the distance, then you can take responsibility and you can heal. But I'm here to tell you, if you can't get to the place where you have true, unattached compassion for the borderline and a true desire to at least accept some, understanding that they have a mental illness, you'll never heal. And you'll never detach from them. You think you're detaching with your anger. You think that I hate them, I don't want anything to do with them, and I hear this all the time. I don't want anything to do with them. There's no danger of me getting back together with them. They were horrible. They did this and they did that. Well, the anger that you have, even in wanting to punish them, because that's what you're doing by saying, I don't want anything to ever do with them again and screw them, and that's a desire to punish them. Punishment is, even though you think you're wanting to separate, even people who commit murder, they're still attached. The reason why they call it crimes of passion is because they're still attached, and it's a really irrational way of trying to control somebody and get them to do what you want. Serial killers do the same thing. You'll hear serial killers talk about when they kill somebody, they take trophies, and or a lot of them will say, oh, yes, they're my spirit wives now. So it's not about separating. Your anger, your desire to seek vengeance on them is not a desire to separate. It is actually a twisted way of trying to stay connected to them. Because the opposite of love is not hate. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin. You can't hate somebody unless you actually secretly want them to love you. But the opposite of love is apathy. No feeling, no attachment. This is how you know you've healed. And I keep saying over and over again, I've achieved a state of healing in my borderline relationship because I have no attachment one way or the other. I could very easily forget she ever existed. The only reason that I don't is because I choose to stay on this channel because people ask me to stay on here. And I love psychology and looking at, the inner workings of the human psyche. So this is a fun channel for me to be on, but I'm not here because I'm trying to work through any residual pain. I don't have any. I don't have any feelings about her. I don't have any attached feelings about her. I have compassion for her. I honestly can say that I want her to find health and healing, and I'm also okay that if that never happens, it's none of my business. For me, the only way that I got to that place was to truly go through the process, which you saw me do in the early parts of this channel. When you look at my first videos, in a different background than this, that was when I was trying to go through all that, coming to all these understandings, and you saw my ability to have compassion for the borderline. You saw it increase over time. It's because in the beginning I had to see her a certain way because I had to be convinced there was no way it was ever going to work. Not just like be angry about it, but to have a real deep comprehension of, wow, this is impossible. I've been going after the impossible this whole time. That gave me the opportunity to heal. Gave me the opportunity to heal the underlying causes that drove me into the relationship, which was the abuse and neglect from my mother, which was horrifically painful, and I became really aware of it. And I focused on that. And when I worked on that, then she stopped being the issue. And then I realized, you know what? It's been superficial the whole time. My intense emotional reaction to somebody that I had a very superficial connection with was irrational. And now I realize the real thing was I was trying to work out my issues with my mom. It's one thing to intellectually know that, it's another thing to feel it. So when it comes to making judgments about what the borderline's motivations are, you cannot take yourself out of the equation if you've been with a borderline. That's why, when people come on and put statements, I'll say, first tell us what your connection is, because that'll tell me what, where you are on the stage of the evolution of your journey, and it will let me know very likely what your emotional agendas are. We all have them, so please don't tell me you don't have one. I have one right now. I believe that I am aware of what my emotional agendas are, so I'm able to analyze myself and be able to correct and heal any emotional agendas that are irrational and hurtful to me. So, in this past video, I was saying that borderlines as much as you want to, you may want to say that they know exactly what they're doing, they're evil, and or they're just doing it for their own pleasure and they're using you. All those things, there's only partial truth to that. But I'm trying to say that that's not accurate, and that the reason why the ex-partner of the borderline or the NPD needs to blame the borderline and ascribe evil intentions to them is actually because you have an unconscious emotional agenda to get them to become aware so that they will stop their behavior and turn around and give you the love that you want. And until you become fully aware that you still want them to love you, even in your rage and your pain, you won't be able to truly see what's going on with them. And if you can truly see what's going on without attachment, which I'm not saying is easy, but when you can do that, then you will actually be able to go, you'll wake up from your delusion and you'll go, oh my God, what was I doing? You're trying to do something impossible. When you become aware of that your desire can't be met, and you look at it rationally, you'll stop. Because it's irrational to keep seeking love from somebody that can't give it to you. Right? So, a lot of people had some thoughts about it, and I want to share some of those with you. There's a really cool, funny response, because I talked about, when you get, even though you're not a borderline, if you're a partner of a borderline, you're whatever, childhood issues brought you into that relationship, you still become infected. You don't get the hardware problems that borderlines have in their own brains and their own psyche, but you get an appearance of it, and it's like, getting bit by a zombie, right? Zombies coming at you, they bite you, you get infected, and then you become a zombie. So you become a borderline, it's like a false program that comes in and you start acting like a borderline and thinking like a borderline, which is what keeps you in the relationship. She says, I refer to my boyfriend as my pet zombie. And I said, lucky him. So here's an idea of what I'm talking about. So what happens is people get into this middle ground. This is one of the things our brain does. Our brain will take us into this middle ground where we have, just like the borderline, we have some awareness, but we're still wrapped up in our emotional agenda, especially if you have an unconscious. Bear in mind, unconscious means you're not aware of it. So you could be listening to me right now thinking, I don't have that, when in reality, underneath the surface, it's driving everything. One of the ways you know somebody has an unconscious emotional agenda is if they have a lot of anger, a lot of defensiveness about a position that they have. For instance, going and telling somebody who's obviously an alcoholic, hey, you've got a problem, you're an alcoholic. And their response will to get angry and say, I can do whatever the hell I want. Just because I'm not doing what you want doesn't mean I have a problem. I can quit anytime I want. Whereas somebody who isn't attached to it, you say, you have a drinking problem. They're going to go, I hope that's not true. You might be right. What should I do? Should I go to Alcoholics Anonymous and see if that's somebody who doesn't have an attachment, which of course, somebody who says that obviously wouldn't be an alcoholic. An alcoholic always responds in defensiveness. So when I point out to you that you have an emotional agenda, you have an unconscious emotional desire to be loved by this borderline that you have gone on and on telling me how evil they are, you're going to get defensive about that. So one of the questions that I asked in that video was, why would they do this? Why would borderlines do this? In other words, they're doing it because they want to manipulate you. They want to use you. They want to lie to you. They're planning it out. That they're getting off on all of the pain that they're causing you, and which there's some truth. All of those things happen, but those are superficial symptoms of something else. And so in terms of needing to ascribe conscious intention to their damaging behavior, my question to you is, why would they do that? Because they're obviously not getting anything out of it. They're in tremendous pain all the time. The damage that they do to the relationship is also damaging to them. They don't have love. They end up usually not having, money, jobs. So it doesn't make sense for you to make them out to be these evil geniuses that are planning out this very elaborate way of harming you, when you look at their life and you see that their life is a mess. So my question is, why do they do that? I'm not asking you to give me superficial understandings. I'm wanting you to realize they really don't understand what they're doing, and they're not these evil geniuses. They are people who have a mental illness that is driving them, that is giving them these compulsions to act in these really self-destructive ways. You happen to be there, so it's going to be destructive to you as well. But their actions are self-destructive. You're giving them this evil genius moniker, thinking that you are the focus, and they're doing this to you so that they can get from you what they want, as though they really know what they're doing. But the truth is that that's not the case at all. That doesn't deny the fact that they can be manipulative, that they can be deceitful, that they can plan things out, that they can, do these things. But again, those are superficial understandings. You've got to go deeper if you want to heal. So I want to read a comment here. And bear in mind, just because you make a statement doesn't make it a fact. I did that, the irony is that somebody makes one of these, blanket statements in a comment, where I had just gone through in the video that they're responding to, saying to somebody, just because you say something is a fact doesn't make it a fact, right? So this is a very codependent thing. You state a fact, and then because, as though it means something. Where did you come up with that? How did you come to that conclusion? How does that benefit you? You cannot take your connection to it. How does it benefit you to make these statements? So I'll do it with myself. How does it benefit me to, on the one hand, tell you that it is impossible to have a relationship with a borderline, that they will eventually discard and damage their connection to you to such a degree that it can never be healed, even if it takes decades. And yet at the same time, I say that I have tremendous compassion for them. They have a mental illness, and they are not responsible for the actions that they're taking. How does that benefit me to put me in that space? It benefits me because I heal. I think I'm accurate, but that's beside the point. It benefits me because it helps me to heal. Now, I'm also not attached to that. I'm really not. I'm coming to this conclusion because I'm honestly wanting to find out the truth, and I'm honestly wanting to find out the truth that is going to allow me to heal. And I heal when I'm able to be in that place where I'm in both understandings at the same time, without attachment. So you have to take a look at what your emotional attachments are and what you want to accomplish. What I'm saying is that people who want to, now this is all happening unconsciously, so you're not aware of this. You are also going to want to fight me on it. You're also going to, if you have an attachment to it, it's going to be confusing, and you're going to want to jump from one side to the other. So that's what's ironic about this, because I said in the video, just because you make a blanket statement doesn't make it a fact. And then this person starts off their statement with a blanket statement as though it's a fact. They throw out an assumption and just, assume that I'm going to swallow that assumption, and therefore I'm going to come to the same conclusion. So this person says, the thing is that BPD is not a mental illness. It's a personality disorder. So that's like saying BPD is not a mental illness, it's a trauma response. And I went out to point out personality disorder is a form of mental illness. So right off the bat, I know this person has an unconscious emotional agenda to hold the borderline consciously responsible for their actions. I already know that, which tells me already this person has an unconscious agenda to get the borderline to become aware of their behavior and how much they've hurt them so that they can turn around and love them. This person is still attached to whoever their borderline is, no matter whether they're together or not. I know this just based on that first sentence because it's irrational. Anybody who does any amount of research will find out that from the mental health profession, they believe personality disorders are mental illnesses. So to say it's not a mental illness, it's a mental illness. It's like that. BPD is not a mental illness, it's a personality disorder. It's not a mental illness, it's a mental illness. They are indeed aware of what they're doing. Again, blanket statement. There are levels of awareness. Having an intellectual awareness of something doesn't mean you comprehend it. I'll give you an example. I heard from one of my martial arts students years ago, we were talking about the psyche and blah, blah, blah. And he shared with me some study that he had come across where people's corpus callosum has been severed. Corpus callosum is some brain tissue, some nerve tissue that connects the two halves of the brain. If you don't have that, it makes it challenging to understand your thoughts versus your feelings, because one side of the brain is more emotional, the other side is more intellectual. So in that experiment, the whoever's running the experiment would whisper into one ear, I don't remember which it was, get up and walk across the room. Person would get up and walk across the room, and then they'd go to the other ear and say, why did you do that? And the person would say, because I was thirsty. In other words, the brain will find a way to justify your behavior. They think they have an understanding of what they're doing when in reality they have no idea why they're operating on some impulse. Borderlines are the same way. Trust me. They may be able to superficially understand, and they may be able to even tell themselves, I'm doing it because of this. For example, when my borderline discarded me the final time, it was the same scenario that I'm sure all of you have gone through, right after the deepest emotional, intimate connection where you couldn't be more in love and more connected and more, just what normally gives you this feeling of safety, and now we're going to move forward, which of course I felt. The very next day, she then said that I was out to get her, that I was destroying her sense of self, that I had been meticulously planning out this way to gaslight her and to make her feel insane. And of course, she did it on Christmas. Christmas Eve, she dumped this on me. And so I was left alone in the house that I had traveled 3 hours from where I live in order to get a house for us. And I was living alone on a mattress in an empty house that I had gotten for her. And knew nobody, and I had to spend all of the Christmas holidays by myself without internet, and in the middle of summer without air conditioning, lying on a mattress, crying my eyes out. The worst possible discard that could have happened at that time. And when I tried to get closure, talked about it to her later, she responded when I said to her, when she was trying to say, we're not just working out of this, and I said, but it's not making any sense. The day before on Christmas Eve, and she goes, Christmas Eve? And I go, yeah, we were talking on Christmas. She goes, I don't know anything about dates, right? There's flag number one. She's clearly not understanding, time. She can't remember what happens when. And then I said, well, do you remember when you were holding me in your arms and I was crying and you were telling me how much you loved me? What happened to that you went from that to the next day telling me that I'm the worst person that ever existed and that I'm really unsafe and you can't have any contact with me? And she said, yeah, you were crying and I was wiping your tears, but, I was just scraping the barrel. I mean, I said, you were just faking it? Yeah, I was just telling you what you wanted to hear. And I know that none of that is true. I know that she meant every word that she said when she was taking care of me. I know that what was happening was that she had this impulse to separate from me because I knew enough about borderline personality disorder to know about splitting. And I also know that she had no control over coming up with a false narrative to justify her behavior. She was trying to justify to herself as much as to me. It had nothing to do with me. She was justifying to herself why she was destroying the relationship with the one man that truly loved her. So the point is that having an intellectual understanding is meaningless without an emotional comprehension. So, let's look at this. So this is, again, I believe this person has an unconscious agenda to get the borderline. In other words, they have a need to believe that the borderline knows what they're doing, because if the borderline knows what they're doing, there's hope that they'll love you. If the borderline does not know what they're doing and they truly have a mental illness, then this person will have to accept what they don't want to accept, which is that there's no hope. They will never get any love. Bear in mind, even if they intellectually know there's no hope, on an emotional level, what they're still wanting is to get their parents to love them. And if you can hold on to the idea that borderlines can love you if they chose to, what you're really doing is you're trying to tell yourself that your mom and your dad will one day turn around and love you, even if your parents are dead. It doesn't matter. This is why this is an unconscious agenda. This is why this person is saying two things at the same time and has no understanding that they're talking gibberish, that they're double talking gobbledygook. The thing is, this person says, that BPD is not a mental illness. It's a personality disorder, to which I responded, personality disorder is a type of mental illness. They go on to say, they are indeed aware of what they're doing. They just choose to rationalize it in order to deal with it, because facing that pain equals facing themselves. There is the assumption right there. The assumption this person has is, if I could just get them to face themselves, they would stop hurting me. Listen to it again. And again, bear in mind, you have to start with an assumption. Assumptions create conclusions. If your assumption is accurate, your conclusions will be accurate. If your assumptions are inaccurate, your conclusions will be inaccurate. If you are holding on to an unconscious agenda, you are going to come up with confused, inaccurate assumptions to hold on to your illogical conclusions. The illogical conclusion this person has is, if I can just get the borderline to face themselves, they'll love me. Therefore, they know what they're doing. Therefore, it's not a mental illness. Because to accept that it's a mental illness means they have to accept the pain of the hopelessness of never being loved. And on an unconscious level, what this means is, mommy and daddy will never love me, which translates into, I will never be loved. So I want you to understand that this person's response is coming from an unconscious emotional agenda of trying to avoid the feeling that they have, which is they will never be loved. Okay? So hold on to that, and now listen to this comment. The thing is that BPD is not a mental illness. It's a personality disorder. They are indeed aware of what they're doing. They just choose to rationalize it in order to deal with it, because facing that pain equals facing themselves. It's much easier to just ignore accountability. I do sympathize with them because it's rather tragic in my opinion. It forces them to repeat the same pattern in every relationship over and over until they self-destruct. And what is ironic here is that this person is projecting, because we all do it, is telling you what they believe about themselves, which is that they don't have an emotional issue. They're not a codependent. that they rationalize their relationship with the borderline in order to deal with it, because facing the hopelessness means facing themselves. It's much easier for them to just ignore accountability. In other words, you chose to be with a borderline. Now, let's take this about, let's replace BPD with codependence. Right? And I'll use the parlance of the day, which is codependent. There's no such thing as codependence. It's trauma bonding, or it's trauma response, or I'm an empath, I'm a carer, I'm a giver. So let's just insert that. The thing is that there's no such thing as codependence. It's just being an empath who cares too much. They are indeed aware of what they're doing. No, I'll change it to I, because they're really talking about themselves. The thing is, I'm not a codependent. I'm just an empath. I am indeed aware of what I'm doing. I just choose to rationalize it in order to deal with it, because facing that hopelessness equals facing myself. It's much easier to just ignore my accountability for choosing to be with somebody who has a mental illness. It's projection. You see that? Listen to it again. Now see that what the codependent is doing is they are projecting their own denial and explaining their own denial by projecting it onto the borderline, who is not them. They're projecting themselves onto the borderline. The thing is that BPD is not a mental illness. It's a personality disorder. They are indeed aware of what they're doing. They just choose to rationalize it in order to deal with it, because facing that pain equals facing themselves. It's much easier to just ignore accountability. I now know exactly how this person deals with their codependence and why they need to believe that the borderline is indeed accountable and is capable of choosing to do something different. Because to accept the fact that they have a mental illness, like they said, means to accept that it's hopeless, that mommy and daddy will never love you, which means nobody will ever love you. So now if I can just get this borderline to love me, that'll mean that I can be loved and mommy and daddy love me. This is all happening on an unconscious level. If you can't come to that realization, you won't heal. And there's nothing I've said about this person that isn't true about me. Okay? Let's look at another one. Let's see what else. Okay, here's another one. This person says, again, and it, guys, if you want to make a statement, if you want to ask a question, it always helps to have context. This is one of the narcissistic things of our society, when people just type in as though I know what the context is. Seriously, put some effort into it so that we hear the context. This person starts in the middle of a thought as though I know the context of what they're talking about, and I have to think about it. So, do me a favor, help me understand the context. This is again in response to this video where I say that that borderlines have a disease and they don't know what they're doing, and they have a lack of ability to control their impulses. And to believe that they do have the ability means that you still want them to turn around and love you. If you can just convince them how much pain they've caused you, they'll stop and they'll turn around and become rational. So this person says, I don't see why it can't be both. What do you mean by that? I can only assume after having to think it through that what you mean is, can they be both have a mental disease and have responsibility at the same time? Because it has to be one or the other. You have to pick one. That's why. This is a convenient place for somebody who is in pseudo recovery, which we all go through. This is part of the process. A lot of people get stuck here though. So a lot of people come to the awareness that borderline personality disorder is a disorder, a mental illness, something which begins to explain their hurtful, irrational behavior. But they still, because I know I did the same thing, they never truly come to the awareness that it's hopeless. And they never truly become aware of their emotional agenda, that what they're really trying to get from the borderline is to get mommy and daddy's love. And to accept that the borderline will never love you and heal from that means that you have accepted mommy and daddy will never love you and that you are lovable. But if you believe that you are not lovable, then accepting the reality that mommy and daddy will never love you becomes intolerable. Therefore, you have to hold on to the unconscious agenda that mommy and daddy could have loved me if they just understood my pain and or if they faced themselves. But in order to accept that mommy and daddy never would love you and that the borderline will never love you, you first have to accept that you are worthy of love and that somebody out there will love you. But if you are attached to your parents, like the borderline, you can't accept that. It is intolerable, because to accept that somebody out there can love you for who you are would mean that you have to reject mommy and daddy. And that becomes intolerable. And then you end up wanting, as this person wants, to be in both places at the same time, which means not really healing, but having just enough intellectual understanding so that then you can ascribe logic and intention to the irrational behavior, and therefore it gives you a motivation to stay in the relationship. In other words, even though you've been out of the relationship for 10 or 20 years, you still can't get them out of your mind. You still can't heal. Okay, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but if you can meditate on this and apply it to yourself, you can heal. So this person says, I don't see why it can't be both, i.e. why they can't have a mental disorder and also be fully responsible. Goes on to say, my ex was a borderline who did all the splitting, emotional dysregulation, and all the borderline stuff we all know about. But she was a complete dickhead narcissist on top of it. Doublespeak. Borderline personality disorder is a form of NPD. It's a form of narcissism. So to say they did all the borderline stuff and on top of that they were a narcissist is like saying they were a borderline and on top of that they were a borderline. This tells me this person is in denial. They make a distinction between borderline splitting and narcissism. If you understand that somebody is a narcissist, you know, that they have the mental illness of NPD, then you understand that they're broken. Yes, they plan things out. Yes, they plan to harm you. Yes, they deceive you. But it's not because they're evil geniuses, because NPDs, for the most part, their lives are a mess also. Because they're broken and they have a mental illness and they can't see reality for what it is. And they don't see you. You think that they see you and still want to harm you. That is your infantile experience. Every child goes through that because every child thinks they're the center of the universe. And when mommy and daddy don't give them what they want, they believe that it's personal. Now, if you internalize that on an unconscious level, you become an adult. That means that every time somebody rejects you or harms you, you then take it personally. They did it to me. The truth is, people don't. Everybody's narcissistic. Everybody does things for their own issues. And if they are narcissistic and they're abusive and they lie and cheat, it has nothing to do with you. It's about them. And when you can understand that, you don't have to take it personally and you can heal. So this person still takes it personally. And most people, in my experience, people who are on this channel, if they have some awareness of codependence and BPD, they're somewhere in the middle. And hopefully I can help you move towards and evolve beyond that so you can completely look at yourself, accept the hopelessness of it, not take it personally, and heal. But if you can't, you're going to be stuck in the middle here where it has to be both and neither at the same time. You're still going to be holding on to the need to ascribe intent to their actions, meaning that they're choosing to do it to you, and if they wanted to, they could stop. I don't see why it can't be both, this person says. My ex was a borderline who did all the splitting, emotional dysregulation, and all the borderline stuff we all know about. But she was a complete dickhead narcissist on top of it. Subtle put-downs, flirted with friends, lied all the time, went in my phone, read my emails, stuff like that. You can't really say, why would they do that? When? I can say that. The point I'm saying when I say why would they do that is to get you to ask the question, how does it benefit them? This is the question people aren't stopping to ask. They want to believe the borderline is an evil genius who's got this plan that's going to result in them netting all of this great stuff where they're going to benefit from you and then go off and then benefit from somebody else, and they're going to build this giant empire of all the things that they've stolen from people. So my question to you is, what does it gain them? They don't gain anything from it. They also suffer from their own actions. They end up alone. They end up miserable. They end up worse off than they were before. As time goes on, the more bridges they burn, the more alone they become, and the more pain they're in. That is the sign of somebody who is out of control and has a mental illness. That is not the sign of an evil genius who knows who you are and sees what a beautiful person you are and is choosing not to love you because they want to feast on you. That is not their motivation. And until you can accept that you have an attachment to believing that they will someday turn around and love you, you will never be able to make sense of it, which is why it's making you so crazy. It's a simple answer. They have a mental illness. They do not comprehend emotionally what the hell they're doing. They don't see you, and they don't have any clue what they're doing to you. Even the borderlines who say, no, yes, we do. No, that's guilt. That guilt is not understanding. That's still superficial. That's why the guilt never results in a change in behavior. The only thing that results in a change in behavior is when they become aware that this is damaging to me and I want to learn how to regulate this so that I don't hurt myself. The borderlines that I've talked to who have been in therapy for 10 plus years, who know and have the techniques, they still split, but they've come to realize that their partner, their non-borderline partner, can't fix them, that they have to go parent themselves. That's opposite from what happens when the borderline is full of guilt and then hoovers. It means that they don't understand. They're still trying to use you as their fix. And you're doing the same thing. You're chasing after them. When they hoover you, you feel fixed. It means both of you have no fucking clue what is going on. This is why it's a two-way street. The empath cosigns the borderline, and the borderline cosigns the empath. It is a two-way street. Until you can accept that, you won't heal. All right, so let's continue. You can't really say, why would they do that? I can say that, and I encourage you to say that. What do they get from it? They don't, which means there's something wrong with them. They don't know what they're doing, or they would do something differently. Everybody wants to be loved. The borderline wants to be loved more than anybody. So obviously their behavior is not accomplishing their goal, which means there's something broken up here. So you can't really say, why would they do that? When? You also just said they have a mental illness. Borderlines are irrational and they do irrational stuff, especially self-destructive stuff. So why do they blow up relationships, quote unquote? Why would they do that? It's fun. There you go. This is an infantile response. This you are, again, tell me, how is that fun? How is it exciting? I can understand how it distracts them from their pain, but trust me, it's not fun. That you're giving them this power that, it's sort of like playing tiddlywinks. It's fun. I do it because it's fun. That is superficial, and it's childish of you to think that they are doing something, and it also minimizes the trauma that you're experiencing, which is part of your codependence, to minimize your own trauma. When somebody tears your guts out, like what mine did, I explained to you the way mine did to me, I walked away from that going, that was so unbelievable. How could somebody do that to somebody else? Trust me, she didn't do it because it was fun. She did it because she's extremely disturbed and she was acting out on herself, and I happened to be there. I know that because I went to go see her 2 weeks later, and I happened to catch her in her most truest, vulnerable state. And I saw, because she wasn't able at that moment to put on a facade because she wasn't expecting me to be there. She thought I was going to talk to her on the phone. When I knocked on the door, she didn't know, what are you doing here? I said, I told you I was going to come over. She said, I thought you were going to talk on the phone. I said, no, I told you I was coming over. And she couldn't put herself together. She was still in her nightgown and she couldn't put a facade together. And she was incapable of communicating. She didn't understand anything that I was saying. She was looking at me like a deer in the headlights. I could tell there was no recognition on her face of who I was. I was looking at somebody who had a mental illness. I saw who she was underneath. I'm willing to bet, Jake 37, you've never seen your borderline. No matter how long you've been with her, you never saw her true self. You saw her facades, which you enjoyed, and you saw her destructive responses, but you never truly saw her as herself. In that moment, I saw this woman is incapable of doing anything. She's completely, totally powerless. She doesn't even know who she is, what her name is, or what time it is, or what day it is, literally. So to say, why do they do that? It's fun. That is your childish need to ascribe a superficial, malignant intent against you because of your childish narcissism. You don't have the compassion to understand that they're doing it because they have a mental illness. You are objectifying them. Your need to make them into somebody whose job is to love you. And when they don't do it, you respond like a little child and you say, I hate you, you're mean. Think about that. That is so judgmental. Why? Let's read all of the horrible things she did to you. She was a complete dickhead narcissist, subtle put-downs, very horrible. Flirted with friends in front of you, I'm assuming. Horribly demeaning. Lied all the time. You can't trust her. You're not worthy of the truth. Went into your phone, so she didn't respect any of your boundaries. Read my emails, stuff like that. So why do they blow up relationships? Why would they do that? It's fun. It's exciting. They like drama. These aren't Stepford wives. I never said they were Stepford wives. Stepford wives are women who are controlled and abused by their husbands. What subtle unconscious guilt do you have that makes you try to defend that you're not treating her like a Stepford wife? That tells me that you're a codependent who needs to control her, and you have guilt about it, so you have to bring it up and say, I'm not trying to control her like a Stepford wife. Denial of your own codependence. These aren't Stepford wives we're talking about here. If that's what you wanted, you wouldn't be with this type of chick to start with. Again, this is projection. You're talking about yourself here. This is what you tell yourself. I'm not treating her like a Stepford wife because that's not what I wanted. I wouldn't want to be with this type of chick to start with. We guys, and then now back, we guys codependents, that's what he says, we guys codependents like a bit of the crazy. So now you're minimizing your insanity. We like a bit of the crazy. That's not a bit crazy. A bit crazy is putting on extra makeup. A bit crazy is throwing some glitter around and staying up until 3 a.m. on the weekend. That's a bit crazy. So don't bullshit me with this. I like them a little bit crazy. No, you seek after the really mentally ill because you are a codependent who is seeking to recreate the drama, like you said. It's fun, it's exciting, they like the drama. You're talking about yourself. And we all know that that's a way to escape your own pain. We guys, codependents, like a bit of the crazy. Then we all fall on our fainting couches when they act crazy. Anyway, just wanted to say it could be both. You're not saying it's both. I'm saying it's both. I'm saying that yes, they do all those things. They do manipulate, they do lie, they do deceive, but they're not doing it just because it's fun. They're doing it because they have a mental illness. You're using the mental illness label when it suits you so that you can explain away their behavior while still holding on to the need to believe that they have power to do something differently, i.e. it's just fun. They're just doing it because it's fun, and they could do something different, but they like it. It's really, in listening to it, it's offensive because it minimizes my trauma, and it minimizes your trauma, and it also minimizes their trauma. You're in denial. So you really aren't in a place where you're seeing both. To see both means, yes, they have a mental illness, they cannot control their impulses, they are damaging themselves horrifically. They commit suicide. Borderlines commit suicide. So if it was just fun and they were doing this for fun, they wouldn't end up committing suicide over it. Because they commit suicide over the destroyed relationships, among other things. So you're minimizing your own trauma, you're minimizing their trauma, and as well you're minimizing my trauma. And you're not acknowledging the hopelessness that mommy and daddy's never going to love you, and you aren't allowing yourself to get to the place of healing, which says that there are people out there who can love me, but in order to accept their love, it means I have to psychologically kill my parents. There's one verse in the Bible. I'm not a big fan of the New Testament at all, but there's one verse that Jesus says which is brilliant psychological healing. Jesus is traveling through some village, and some guy comes running out and he says, Master, I want to follow you. Please wait for me. I have to go bury my parents. Now in Jewish culture, a lot of people don't know this when they read the Bible. Jewish culture is that it is imperative that you bury somebody within 24 hours. And if you don't do that, you are the worst person that's ever existed. So what this guy was asking of Jesus in this, assuming that Jesus existed, what he was asking of Jesus was actually very reasonable, and any good Jew would say, oh, of course, please, bury your parents, I'll wait here for 24 hours and then we'll go. But what Jesus said to him is, let the dead bury themselves. If you're not willing to deny father and mother for me, you're not worthy of me. To which the man was very sad, and he turned around and held his head down because he had to follow protocol. He was not willing to deny his father and his mother. That is a symbol of following and being true to yourself. In order to heal, you must be willing to deny mother, father, brother, sister, wife, husband, when it is about your health and your happiness. You must be willing to do that, or you cannot heal. So in order to let go of the need for the borderline to love you and accept you, you must first accept that you are worthy of love and there is somebody out there who can love you. When you fully accept that, number one, it's hopeless, your parents will never love you, the borderline will never love you, that somebody out there can love you, you will then have to completely psychologically separate from your childhood of origin. And most people don't want to do that because on an unconscious level, it feels like you are dying. If you're not willing to go through that death, you'll never recover. Wanting to see the borderline's behavior as cute and fun, and they're doing it because they like it, means that you aren't willing to let go of your mom and dad. I hope you can fit all that together. Meditate on it. This is why people usually, most codependents that I'm working with here, they never really get past this point. They have enough knowledge to be able to justify it and justify the borderline's behavior, to describe their behavior without truly comprehending it. And they truly do not comprehend their own attachment to their childhood of origin. Can you see that? Anyway, just wanted to say it could be both. No, you're not. You're saying neither, actually. They're not necessarily pure as the driven snow. I never said they were. You're needing for me to say that so you can deny it. I've never said they were pure as the driven snow. I have never once said that the universe does not hold them responsible. That's the irony of it. that there is a sliver of a chance, if they're willing to do the work and look at themselves, which is horrifically difficult. You can't even imagine how difficult it is. Trust me. If you're saying that you think it's fun, you don't have any idea how challenging it is for them. But they do have responsibility, and if they are willing to take that sliver of a chance to work their ass off and do the most challenging, recovery process of their life, they can learn to take responsibility. They'll never get over their borderline. You'll never be able to fix them. They'll never be able to, they'll never stop hating you and loving you. They'll never stop splitting. But they will if they spend 10 plus years of examining themselves and really going deep and understanding the depth of the pain of their trauma and their responses. Then they can manage their behavior. So that's the best you're going to get. And then he says, they're not necessarily pure as the driven snow, but happen to have a mental illness. That's rigid thinking on your part. I never said that. So again, what you're saying, you're telling me that you have rigid thinking. Again, this is all, projection. You're projecting onto me your thought process. Because actually, by telling me that they're just doing it for fun, you're actually saying they are pure as the driven snow. They have complete control over what they're doing, and they're just choosing not to. That's you, not me. I never said that. I never said they're pure as the driven snow. Love the channel and agree with you on 95% of your analysis, probably when it's about how horrific and damaging their behavior is, because that suits your agenda, and I'm glad I understand that. But just wanted to challenge you a bit on this particular point. Well, you're not challenging me a bit, you're challenging me a lot, and that's okay. But, I hope I can help you with that. And again, the three-pronged approach makes me want to ask Jake, are you in therapy for your codependence? Have you worked the 12 steps? And are you doing daily meditation? There may be other ways to recover. Those are the three ways that I know of. And if you want to have what I have, you got to do what I do. And in order to do that, you go to on the channel next to subscribe, there's a join button. Click the join button and subscribe at the super empath level, and you'll get access to members only videos where I take you step by step into how to change your thinking, how to begin a new process, a new assumption about yourself and the universe. And then I give you specific meditations, and I talk about how to get involved with the 12 steps and work on them. And then I give you specific meditations, breath meditations that change your brain chemistry so that you have the objectivity to stand and look at yourself and go, wow, I really have an emotional agenda here. I really want them to love me, and I'm in denial about that. I say that I understand, but the truth is I still am waiting for them to turn around and love me, and that has to do with my mom. In order to do that, we have to have our brains functioning correctly. And so there are meditations, breath meditations, that change that. And then I teach you a breath meditation which will allow you to integrate your feelings where you can actually be both places at once. What this guy says that I'm not doing, which I am. I completely 100% hold them accountable and responsible for their actions, which is why I don't have anything to do with them. And I know that it's impossible to be with them. And at the same time, I have compassion for them, and I know that they suffer from an extremely horrific mental illness that limits their ability, severely limits their ability to have power over controlling their actions and resisting their impulses. If you want to be in that space where you have true compassion for them and for yourself, and that there's no longer any need, like this guy said. I mean, just listen to some of the things here. He's making himself sound, he probably believes, and he's probably trying to be, very objective. But first he talks about, my ex was a borderline who did all the splitting, emotional deregulation, and borderline stuff. But she was a complete dickhead narcissist on top of it. Subtle put-downs, flirted with friends, lied all the time, went into my phone. This person doesn't understand that that's the behavior of somebody that's splitting. He makes a difference between what they go through inside themselves and their behavior. And there's no difference. Those are the symptoms of splitting. This guy doesn't even understand what borderline personality disorder is. So if you want to be able to get to an objective place where you can understand, oh, the reason why my borderline ex split with me on Christmas Eve and told me that she was just scraping the barrel when she was telling me that she loved me, I have the ability to understand that I know that there's a part of her that can't stop herself. I could feel it on the phone. That, when she said, oh, I was just scraping the barrel, I could tell that she couldn't stop herself from saying that really horrific thing. Which means that we're dealing with somebody who doesn't have the ability, at least doesn't have full ability to stop themselves from acting on their impulses. Which means they've got a mental illness. I can accept them without judgment and still hold them responsible and not have anything to do with them. And not be in pain over it. If you want that, you got to do what I do. So that's it. I won't belabor it. I've probably repeated myself 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 times. But that's it. Click on the join button if you want to have what I have. Other than that, I will see you guys soon. Thanks for showing up, and we'll see you next time. In the meantime, let's take a look at what codependence really is.